subtitles and the audio.
Okay.
We're gonna start. We're gonna start in 15 o'clock in Chile, and 10 minutes around. But we use this 10 minutes to adjustment to test the subtitles and we ensure everything's gonna be okay.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. David, I'm Christian. I'm your host. Today in the Tari Expo. I'm very excited to be here with talking with you. You are one of my heroes.
Well, I will count on you then to translate the audience's questions to me.
Thank you. Bien. Mr. David, ahora le voy a hablar en español para hacer un test del texto. Y es que aparece bien y me están, se puede leer lo que estoy mencionando en el texto en español. Al parecer sí. ¿Se lee bien, Mr. David?
Yes.
Entonces se puede leer y entender lo que estoy hablando en español, usted lo lee en inglés, entonces.
I have a question. Do you want me to have AI companion translating into Spanish on my copy of Zoom, or are you doing it at your end?
Lo estamos haciendo nosotros en este momento. Yo estoy viendo traducido al español lo que usted me está diciendo en estos momentos. Está funcionando con lo que tenemos. Si usted me puede leer en inglés, yo lo leo en español, lo estoy entendiendo. Tiene un pequeño retraso el texto respecto a la voz, pero funciona sin problemas, según lo que veo.
If you were speaking to me, I am not understanding what you're saying.
Dice que no entiende lo que estoy diciendo. Vale. You don't read anything in English?
I am not seeing anything on mine. That's what I was asking. Do I turn on AI companion here on my machine?
Yes. Do you turn on the AI companion, please?
All right. It says request access for meeting questions. Your AI host, your AI companion cannot ask questions about this meeting. We'll just say not now for now. So,
Mr. David,
AI, yes.
in the bottom menu, you have to go to the icon of subtitles. No eye companion. Subtitle.
Oh, not AI companion. Subtitles menu. I don't see a subtitles menu yet.
No, can you see it?
Transcript.
Yeah, you have to. In the left one. In the bottom menu, you have the icon of subtitles, and the option you have to.
I have show captions. Maybe that's it.
The caption, and you have to turn on the translate.
Translation turned on.
And you have to
So my caption language is Spanish. Is that what I want?
you have to choose translate to English. So
you will read captions in for this meeting. All right, I'll set that to English.
Y ahora si hablo en español debería traducirle.
I am seeing your translation. Yes.
It's working now.
Yes.
Perfect. Great.
All right. Great. Bien.
Now, the problem might be if I start to share my screen. I have only one screen on this machine, so let me do a share and share the PowerPoint.
Share. Okay. Okay.
Va a probar.
You have to share your presentation. We make the layout here. Don't worry. Perfect. It's working.
Okay. And I am seeing the translation at the bottom.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. Excellent. Wait 1 minute, please. 1 minute, please. Just 1 minute. Just stay there. Don't shake the screen, please.
Don't share.
Don't change the screen, please. We are ready. We are ready. Okay. Okay.
Bien, bien. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Gracias por estar acá. Gracias por estar acá. El día de hoy, bueno, es la última conferencia que vamos a tener en la Atari Expo 2025 y la verdad es que yo creo que una de las más emocionantes, por lo menos, ha sido todas emocionantes, la verdad, pero yo creo que esta es una de las más emocionantes porque eh, hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial. Yo creo que muchos ya lo conocen, saben de él y saben lo grande que creó y, y lo que terminó siendo. Eh, no solamente juegos, sino que también cofundador de una compañía. Y hoy uno de los monstruos de los videojuegos al día de hoy, que es Activision. Además, para que vamos, todos lo saben, el creador del juego Pitfall, que es uno de los juegos más famosos y también un referente en juegos de plataformas. Así que más allá de seguir hablando, yo quiero presentarles el día de hoy a uno de los héroes de los videojuegos de los 80, uno de los héroes de los que seguimos jugando el día de hoy videojuegos y también fundador de Audacity Games, que está creando juegos el día de hoy. Así que lo presentamos, sin mucho más que hablar, de Don David Crane, que lo tenemos acá en pantalla. Por favor, un aplauso para Don David para poder recibirlo. Muchas gracias, Don David, por estar acá con nosotros.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. I always like to tell stories about my video games, and everyone who plays the games likes to hear stories about how they were made, for example. A bit of a background, as was explained to you, I have been making video games since 1977, almost continuously ever since, for about 50 years. I worked at Atari with Nolan Bushnell way back in 1977 when it was very early started. Shortly after that, with some friends, we spun off of Atari and founded Activision. And we grew Activision into the biggest video game company in the world. So anyway, again, I mean, good afternoon to you guys. It's 10 o'clock in the morning here in California, but I'm very happy to visit you from Zoom. So I brought a presentation today that kind of helps you understand some of the things that we have done over the years to make the Atari 2600 make games that are almost as good as any other console out there. We do that by coming up with unique ways of using the hardware in ways, in fact, that the game or the hardware designer never envisioned. In fact, I was sitting at Atari one day, working away, and I felt the presence of someone standing behind me, and I turned to look, and it was Jay Miner, who was the chip designer for the graphics circuit inside the Atari 2600. And looking at what I was doing, he was shaking his head, and he said to me, I had no idea that my circuit could do what you are doing on the screen there. So we were very proud of being able to make things look really nice on the screen and then make them into fun playing games. So assuming that we can see the presentation on the screen, I have my screen shared. This presentation is going to show some of the interesting ways that we used the Atari 2600 in ways that its designer never intended. I'm often asked, what is my favorite game that I ever did? I usually mention Grand Prix because it has some of the most amazing graphics for the system that has ever been done. this is the screen of Grand Prix. Many of you will have played the game, but it's basically the red car is your player car, and you can move it around on the road. And there are enemy cars that are moving on the road that you try to maneuver around. And if you look at this screen, there's a lot going on. But to give you some perspective, here is what, this is one of my favorite slides about the Atari. For those of you who don't read English, the game systems, the Nintendo and the Sega and the Atari are sitting together. And Nintendo says, remember when we were the gaming systems to have? And Sega says, yep. And the Atari says, I have no memory. Because that is the case. The Atari only has 128 bytes of RAM, and that RAM memory is lost when you turn the machine off. So remember, this system was made in 1977, and hardware was much simpler back then. And it didn't have a bitmap. It could simply display two 8-bit moving objects and some fixed playfield blocks. That was really what they designed the system to do. And they designed it so that it could play Tank. This was one of Atari's arcade games, and they wanted to bring this arcade game into the home. And so what you see generally is you'll see the left player in green and the right player in blue. Those are the 8-bit objects. And then the playfield that you move around are these large square blocks. They are 4 pixels wide rather than the 1 pixel wide of the 8-bit objects. So they're really only for, something without much detail. So I'll try not to get too technical, but there is no bitmap. And what happens is the program writes to the hardware on every scan line of the TV screen. So from the top to the bottom, there are a bunch of scan lines, 262 to be exact. And it is writing objects, graphics, as the TV is scanning. So to do this Tank, you store zeros, which is a blank bit pattern, into the player 0 or left player object until you get down to where you want the Tank to be displayed. Then the program switches to the graphics in the ROM that represent the Tank. Those are 8 bits per line, and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of graphics, or 8 lines, whatever. And then after you're done displaying the Tank, you write zeros again. So this is what the program is doing on every frame of the video. Very shortly after, we figured out that we could use those 8-bit objects multiple times on a screen. This is a screen from Air Sea Battle, another cartridge made very early for Atari. And the blocky playfield object is actually used for score. And then there's the airplanes are the same 8-bit object, but moving it and then changing its graphics and moving it and changing its graphics and moving it. And we'll also do a little bit of a color change to try to give you an impression of how the sky is darker at the top than it is at the bottom. And then each player shoots its missile. That's a 1-bit object that we have access to, and it goes through each band of graphics. And eventually, also in the combat cartridge, let me demonstrate something else. When the chip designer created this system, he made it so that each object, while it's only 8 bits, it can be shown on the screen where each bit is twice as wide, each bit is 4 times as wide, or each of the objects is repeated several times across the screen. So these are the options where you can see, this is supposed to be animating. But anyway, so if you remember this airplane game, you could have the airplanes flying in formation with multiple airplanes. They are the same graphics repeated several times across the screen. So, as I said, I'm trying not to get too technical, but you can actually see these things if you play these games. This is one of the games in the Combat cartridge, which was sold with the console in 1977. So let's look again at the Grand Prix screen. Since I'm building this screen, not from a bitmap, but I'm building it vertically, my program starts out by making a yellow band using the background color, which is adjustable. And then using the player objects using their repeat function, I'm able to create these bushes. And bear with me, they do look like bushes when they're moving. Right now, I don't know what you'd say they look like, but we didn't have a lot of choice back in those days. So then my program changes the background color to gray, which will be the road. And now it puts the cars on the road, creates another band for bushes, and does the same thing for bushes. And the reason for the bushes, it's actually very important. The car, my red car, is not going to move across the screen from left to right. I'm going to be scrolling the world and leaving the car alone. So the bushes will ultimately show the motion of the game, so they needed to be there. I also, at the bottom, added the timer and such. And then there's actually a technique we can use. We hated those little lines at the left side. We cover them up. So let's see if that doesn't animate yet. While I'm here, let me also show that if you look at the yellow car, one of the things that the hardware of the Atari 2600 does is if the pixels go off the right edge of the screen, they show up on the left. So you see that yellow car, it can't be over near the right edge of the screen, or else you'll see it sticking out the other side, which of course breaks the illusion of it going off the screen. I deal with that later. So in making graphics for the Atari 2600, we drew them on paper as pixels. So imagine you have graph paper, which is paper with little square lines, and you color in each little square and then hold it out at arm's length and say, okay, that looks like a crocodile, or that looks like a man. We didn't have any fancy graphics tools. Again, this was 1980 at this point. But we did it on paper and ended up making all these games look pretty good. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the car was created by not only changing the graphics on every scan line of the TV, but also changing the number of copies and width of each pixel, something else that we can change as we're writing this code. So for the first 4 scan lines, the graphics are what you see on the left, but I've told it to give me a second copy of the graphics using that technique that showed how the airplanes can have multiple airplanes. Then at that point, I would use that same, actually, back up. That first one was just 8 bits. For the second group, now I use the copy of 2. So now you see how there's a front tire and a back tire, and they use the exact same graphics. You don't really notice that because the back tire has the fat, wide tire on the back, and the front tire is the narrow tire. Then using each pixel can be 4 pixels wide, I build the body of the car, and then kind of repeat what I did in reverse. And so you've created the shape of the car, building it on the fly, a scan line at a time, using graphics and width and multiple copy features built into the hardware. So then, while I'm doing it, I add a color in each line. So now it looks like there's an axle, it looks like there's a fender that is shaded, and it puts a racing stripe down the middle. And that is the car that you see on Grand Prix. Now, again, I wish it would animate. It's supposed to, but I'm afraid it didn't work this time. So, as you can see, it's trying to animate. Changing the tire pictures make it look like the tires are rotating. Now, remember back to that yellow car. The problem, the way I avoided having that front end of the nose of the car sticking around and wrapping around to the left side of the screen is I made all of these different pictures of the car, some of them longer, some of them shorter. So as the car is going off the screen to the right, I cut off its nose, I cut off its front tire, and I cut off the rest of its body. And so it looks like it is disappearing across or off the right side of the screen. So every one of these pictures had to be created just to give the illusion of the car smoothly scrolling off the screen. The left column is going off the right edge. The right column is the graphics used to make it scroll on to the left edge. And then there's 3 copies of each one to make the tires rotate. But that is, yeah. So let me see if I can, oh, look at that. There we go. So there we go. I got it to animate. I also put this water and this bridge into the game. It's just another bunch of effort. The blue water is the 4-bit playfield, and to get really complicated, here is an illustration of why it's moving smoothly. I cover up its leading and trailing edge. At some point, hopefully, those really technically inclined among you will look at this and see that it's just another trick that I used. So where are we now? All right, so I can always bring this back up if there are questions in the end and be more detailed on the explanation. But I have been making Atari 2600 games since 1977. And a few years ago, I got together with my buddies Gary and Dan Kitchen, and we said, let's make brand new games for the Atari 2600. So we knew when we were doing that we were going to have to make the games so much better because everyone, is used to the PlayStation and Xbox and used to games looking much better than they did back in the 8-bit days. Now, you're here at this conference because you, like me, feel that the games that we did in the 80s were actually more fun than the games that are done today. But still, you're going to compare what they look like to what's in your mind. So what we did before starting Audacity Games to create more games is we created a graphics tool. So no longer are we coloring in pixels on graph paper. We created this tool that let us set the bits, the pixels, the sizes, the positions, the colors, and all that, and we'd get to see on the screen what the object was going to look like when it ended up on the Atari 2600. There is this big snake is in Circus Convoy, game that Gary Kitchen and I co-authored. And this is one of the biggest objects ever seen on an Atari 2600. And it helped that we had this tool to create it. Other examples, there's a clown in Circus Convoy, and often we put in text such as the Casey's Gold title page. And we have this tool that lets us click a pixel and see what it looks like and change positions and colors until we get it to where we really like it. Same thing in Circus Convoy. This tool allows us to animate. So this is the animation of Andre, the circus strongman, who is the main character in Circus Convoy. So we take all those techniques and created some new games. I like to talk about the things I did in the past, but I also have to promote the things I'm doing now. Audacity Games is making brand new games for the Atari 2600. And the company name, I'm not sure how the term Audacity translates into Spanish, but we named the company Audacity Games because who else would have the audacity to create brand new games for a 50-year-old game console? But that is what we're doing now. And I just released Rescue from Poseidon's Gate. This came out less than a month ago. I think it was October 22nd. And it is for sale as well. Now, I understand that Chile uses the NTSC television standard, so you will have NTSC Atari 2600s. We do sell it in PAL as well, if there's anyone attending from a country that uses PAL. And this works on every original Atari console, 2600, 7800. It works on the new Atari 2600 Plus, the new Atari 7800 Plus, and virtually any game console that is out there that plays Atari games. So that's the end of my brief presentation. I always like to leave room for questions. First of all, if there are questions of people who want me to go back to that part of that presentation and explain in more detail, I'm very happy to. Also, many people have their favorite games that I did in my youth. I published almost 100 games. So if any of those games bring up questions in your minds, I'd be happy to answer those as well. Thank you for watching my presentation, and let's have some questions.
Muchas gracias, don David, por su presentación muy didáctica, y se entendieron varias cosas respecto de cómo lograban esas suaves animaciones En el Atari, y como usted bien lo mencionaba, el Atari tenía muy poca memoria y me imagino que herramientas de desarrollo no habían tantas, entonces había que jugársela e innovar mucho respecto de lo que había que desarrollar para cada juego. Antes de ir a las preguntas del público, quería hacerle una pregunta inicialmente. Nosotros sabemos que usted hizo juegos para Atari 2600 y relacionados con Atari, pero también hizo para otras plataformas, llámese Nintendo NES, y en ese caso, la diferencia, o hubo un reto o era más simple trabajar con los gráficos en una plataforma como Nintendo, o más bien, y también si es que el desarrollo de videojuegos y el uso de gráficos en el Atari le ayudó para trabajar en otras plataformas en el desarrollo de gráficos y efectos visuales en los juegos. Por ejemplo, Nintendo NES, llámese, puede ser el juego Los Cazafantasmas o los juegos de los Simpsons que se hicieron para NES. Ujú.
Yeah, well, when we started Activision, the Atari 2600 was the #1 gaming system out there. 1979, there were millions of them, and so they were really the biggest console, the only console to develop on. That said, our philosophy at Activision was there are new consoles coming out. We will watch those new consoles, and when those new consoles sell enough units that there's now a market for cartridges, game cartridges, we would start selling games for those game cartridges or those game consoles. So the first to reach that point was the Mattel Intellivision. It reached 100 or 1 million households, and so that made it a big enough company to support. But what that meant for those of us back in the design lab is we had to open up an Intellivision, reverse engineer it, create some sort of development environment that let us make games on it, study the hardware, study the new microprocessor, and really start all over in figuring out how to make games for that console. Throughout my entire career, every 2 to 3 years, a new console would come out and we would have to do that again. You don't see what's going on in the back lab. All you do is you see the games when they come out. But imagine that every 2 or 3 years, everything that you know has to be discarded, and you have to start thinking in a different way and using a new game console. That happened with the Intellivision, that happened with the Sega Genesis, that happened with the Nintendo NES and the Nintendo SNES. And every new console that came out, we had to start from scratch in creating our hardware systems, our programming manuals, our graphics tools, our sound effects tools, our music tools. We had to make something new for everyone. So there were technical challenges involved. Now, the question is, was it easier or harder as the systems got more capable? Well, certainly it was wonderful to have a lot of memory, both ROM and RAM, and not to be limited to 128 bytes of RAM. But in reality, what you're trying to create is a fun game to play. Yes, you start by making graphics and you start by making characters. And as each console came out, the characters could be more detailed, the characters could have more animations, and the backgrounds could be more attractive. And all of those things were true. But at the end of the day, it was all about designing a game that is fun to play. And frankly, that's not easy to do. I was at a conference with another game developer, one of the creators of a big game like God of War. And he told me, he said, I tried to do what you do, which is figure out how to make a small game with a few little characters fun to play. And I wasn't able to do it. A lot of games you see today look like movies, and they are entertaining, and they're nice stories, and they're very beautiful graphically, but it's not really making fun games. So anyway, that's a skill that those of us who did it back then can still do, figuring out a way to make you interacting with objects on the screen be fun and challenging to play. Does that answer your question?
Así es, don David, muchas gracias por la respuesta. Y una última pregunta. Usted mencionó que no sabía cómo se traducía al español Audacity. Audacity, the word Audacity, is in Spanish is audacia. Audacia. Y quiere decir que ustedes tuvieron, lo que entendí, que tuvieron la audacia de volver a hacer videojuegos que por lo menos por lo que veo yo, el estándar lo volvieron a subir el estándar de la calidad de los videojuegos, por lo tanto están poniendo una vara alta para el resto de los desarrolladores que quieran hacer juegos, que eso es muy bueno, que alguien suba el estándar de lo que se está desarrollando. Ya lo hicieron en su momento con los juegos de Activision, subiendo el estándar, y hoy lo están haciendo subiendo el estándar con los juegos de Audacity Games. ¿Cómo nace la idea? ¿Y cómo nace la idea de tener la audacia? Se juntan, conversan, fue un café, una conversación. ¿Cómo salió la idea de juntémonos, hagamos nuevamente un videojuegos en la plataforma Atari? ¿Cómo nace esa idea de poder, de fundar Audacity Games?
Well, first of all, none of us ever stopped making video games. I've been making video games, as did Gary and Dan, pretty much, with a little on and off, but pretty much continually since the 1980s. It's just we've made games for different consoles. Then Gary and I started a company called Skyworks Technologies, making games for browsers. And we created some of the first advertising-sponsored browser games. Then the iPhone came out, and we made games for the iPhone and the App Store. We had, I think we had 4 or 5 #1 games in the App Store for iPhone games, and at one time had 3 games in the top 10 at the same time. So it's always been, let's make games, and let's make games with whatever technology exists. But for a number of years, we have gone to shows like this one, and in almost every case, during our question and answer sessions, someone would say, could you please make new games for the Atari, because the Atari is our favorite console. And in fact, Atari is our favorite console too. It's very hard, it's very challenging, it's very limited, but once you have created something great on the Atari, it's very rewarding. Because it's so hard, it's very rewarding when you do it well. And, everyone likes to be rewarded in their work. And so anyway, we finally said, okay, to ourselves. People keep asking, let's look into doing it. And we spent 3 years looking at it, developing tools, developing technology. we had to create a plastic injection mold for the plastic cartridge. We had to create circuit boards. We had to create boxes and manuals and labels. And all of the stuff that used to be done at Activision, we had to recreate. So it wasn't easy to make this decision, but we said, let's do the effort. And we didn't announce it until the game was done and ready to sell. Nobody knew that we were working on that for 3 years. And at the same time, we said, everyone is going to look at our Audacity games, and they're going to compare them to our games in the past, whether it be at Activision or Absolute Entertainment, any of our companies that we worked for, we're going to be compared to our other work. So when we brought out Circus Convoy, it was, in my opinion, the deepest, richest, best Atari 2600 game ever made. And it had to be, because we were going to be compared to all of our previous work. So it came about because people asked for it. Then we looked at it and said, yes, we can do it. And then we actually did it. And until we did it and had something that we could really like, we didn't even announce to the public that we were doing it. So now we have Audacity games, and we're putting out new games as quickly as we can.
Wow, tremenda historia, una interesante historia respecto a la creación de Audacity Games. Como podemos ver, él nunca se detuvo de hacer videojuegos, y podemos ver que, y de hecho, los juegos de Audacity ya los pueden adquirir, o sea, pueden comprarlos, ¿ya? Yo tengo pendiente comprar el mío. Ahora, don David, vamos a partir con las preguntas del público, a ver qué cosas interesantes nos pueden preguntar. Así que, ¿hay alguien disponible para poder hacer alguna pregunta del público que podamos hacer ahora? Que levante la mano quien quiera hacer una pregunta a don David, aproveche de hacerla ahora. Vamos para allá. Vamos con él y vamos contigo. Vamos. Por favor, tu nombre.
Hola, don David. Mi nombre es Víctor Saavedra. Es un honor tenerlo acá a quienes conocemos, digamos, sus juegos. Mi pregunta sería, con los recursos limitados que tenía en 1977, ¿con qué programaba o hacía código? Ya que el Apple II estaba en pañales, o el IBM PC muchas veces ya no existía en este tiempo. ¿Qué equipo usaba para programar o para hacer código? Esa es mi pregunta. Muchas gracias, don David.
Muchas gracias.
Well, the Atari 2600 uses a microprocessor. It's a 6502 version that clocks at 1.2 megahertz. That's not gigahertz, that's megahertz. And so the programs have to be written very efficiently. To do that, we wrote the games in assembly language, which a lot of people today think is, something from the dark ages. Well, it sort of is. There are hundreds of programming languages out there, most of them variants of the language C. But we did assembly language because you could make it, make the code as efficient as possible. The code written in other languages is not efficient, but it doesn't matter because the machines are clocking in the gigahertz. So programmers don't have to be efficient today like they did back then. So then we took an Atari 2600 and I designed a circuit that had memory in it that could pretend to be a game cartridge. And that circuit plugged into the Atari 2600 cartridge port. And that circuit connected to a computer. So now we are able to write a game from assemble the code and then download it into the circuit, then reach over and turn on the Atari, and the Atari looks out and it thinks it's got a ROM cartridge plugged into it, but it's actually made with RAM. Without that, I don't know how we would do it, but using that, we're able to write programs and download them into this box and be able to see exactly what the Atari 2600 would look like while playing that game. Again, we didn't have any graphics tools or other tools. Everything else was done on paper. But I think the answer to your question is twofold. One is the programming language we used was assembly language, and the hardware development environment that we used was a circuit that plugged into the Atari and pretended to be a ROM cartridge.
Gracias, don David, por la respuesta. Aquí vamos a ir con otra pregunta del público en estos momentos. Por favor, tu nombre. Adelante.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Diego. Es un gusto conocerlo. Mi consulta va por usted, que era parte de la industria del videojuego desde el comienzo. ¿Cómo vivió el año 83 cuando esta industria tuvo su crisis grande? ¿Y cómo vivió también el tema del videojuego de ET, con el tema de la licencia y todo lo que vino después? Usted, en su apreciación como desarrollador de videojuegos y estando dentro de la industria, ¿cómo fue ese momento? ¿Cómo lo pasó?
Yeah, well, the video game crash was not very fun, to say the least. And ET was not the problem, not the cause of the video game crash. You can look up on Google, and Howard Scott Warshaw, who wrote ET, explains it. And there's a lot of other reasons. In fact, I have often said that Activision was the cause of the crash of the video game business. Not anything we did, but people looking at us to try to do what we did. Basically, in 1979, there was Atari and there was Activision, and nobody else. And we made the best games, and we sold a lot of games. There was a joke that we could throw a video game cartridge up into the air and money would fall down. But we did very good work. Everyone loved it. And we gave people good entertainment. So that's all very good. But other companies looked at our success and said, oh, we can do that. All we need to do is get some money, hire some programmers, and have them make video games for the Atari. And what happened was 30 new companies started to make Atari games. And when they showed up at our trade show, our Consumer Electronics Show, I looked at that and I said, look at those 30 companies. Not one of those is going to be in business a year from now because they don't know how to make games. They forgot that part. It's not about just putting a bunch of people in a room and having them type on keyboards. It's about having talented game designers who can create games that are fun to play. And so that's truly what happened, is all of those companies went out of business and they put out horrible games. Some of you collectors out there have those games because they're horrible, but they're collectible because they're horrible. But they really destroyed the industry. So really, the video game crash was not so much about any one particular game. I mean, certainly Atari, their business people made bad decisions about how many ET games to make. the Pac-Man game was not, nobody liked the Pac-Man game anyway. Games got returned, games got thrown in trash. A lot of things went wrong, but it was mostly just greed and other companies trying to duplicate Activision's success without having talented game designers on staff. The other question also asked about licensing. I created what is widely considered to be the first successful licensed video game when I did Ghostbusters on the Commodore 64. But the way I designed that was, in my opinion, the way to deal with licensing in video games. And instead of just taking a license and putting it on a game, I designed a game that would be a fun game to play, even if it had nothing to do with Ghostbusters. But I set it in the Ghostbusters universe. And so I would have things that would happen in the Ghostbusters universe happening in the game. So anyway, this is just my philosophy, my understanding of the right way to make a license is, first and foremost, you make a game that's fun to play. And then if you put it in the universe or use the characters from a license, it's still a fun game to play, and that's what's the most important.
Muchas gracias, don David, por esa respuesta. No sé si hay alguien más del público que quiera hacer una pregunta. Vamos para allá. Voy corriendo, voy corriendo. Voy para allá. Su nombre, por favor. Adelante.
Hola David, aquí Francisco. Bueno, en primer lugar quería felicitarlo por todo lo que nos ha otorgado nosotros para poder disfrutar su juego. Y bueno, mi pregunta es un poco profunda, pero hablando, retomando el tema de la crisis de los videojuegos del 83, actualmente se está hablando mucho de que la industria de los videojuegos está atravesando por una crisis que todavía no está completamente reconocida, pero le quería preguntar desde su punto de vista, y ya teniendo en cuenta que usted ya es como ya una leyenda dentro del desarrollo, ¿realmente está pasando ahora, atravesando una crisis la industria de los videojuegos? Y si es que tiene alguna opinión de cómo se podría subsanar eso o solucionarlo para poder evitar que vuelva a pasar lo mismo. Eso.
Muchas gracias.
Yeah, certainly a tough question. The video game industry has always been most healthy when there are multiple game consoles competing with one another. So video games will go through cycles, and there will be big successes, and there will be layoffs and such. It's really not a very good industry to work in. One of the reasons that we are doing Atari 2600 games is because we don't need a team of 500 people to make a game. So I don't know that there's any solution to avoiding cycles in the game industry. Like I said, there will be cycles, there will be booms, and there will be busts. And I don't recommend going into the video game business if you ask me. But there are some fun things you can still do there, but it is challenging. The primary issue today in the gaming industry is games cost so much to make. If you are going to ask someone to invest $100 million in making a game, you are not going to be given the freedom to experiment. The reason you see Call of Duty 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, is because when Activision is looking at funding a game, they are not going to be interested in a game about flowers or a game where the character is, you know, sings to his companion to tell him what to do, whatever. Experimentation can't be allowed because the investors are going to spend $100 million and they have to have something at the end that they know they can sell for more than what they spent. That means that what you see is a lot more derivative games. Everything looks kind of the same because that's what the investors can understand. Now, the good news is with some of the other platforms, with Unity, with any smaller development group, there are indie studios that are making games that can allow experimentation, and you will see some good things come out of indie studios. But it's very hard to be financially successful. So, there might be 100 games made for every one that's truly successful. So it's a very hard business to be in.
Muchas gracias por la respuesta, don David. Vamos a tener una última pregunta del público para terminar las preguntas del público, así que vamos para allá. Me he movido bastante, estoy haciendo ejercicio hoy día, don David. Vamos para allá, voy corriendo.
Hi, David. This is Guillermo Fonsalida from the organization for the Expoatari. First of all, thank you so much for joining us in this event that we are preparing during all this year. And also, I want to represent all of you, all the audience, to bring you a warm welcome to you to this scene. My question in this case is, at Audacity Games, are you planning to release a game to the Atari 8-bit computer line?
Well, we, in the first place, we never announce anything until we are actually ready to do it. So we could have an Atari 8-bit computer game in testing right now, and we wouldn't tell you. But don't get your hopes up. We have not yet started one of those. But it is our intention to do other retro game consoles. We just, we're waiting for, kind of like what Activision did, is we're waiting for response from people to see how many people are very much interested in having a new Atari 8-bit game, that sort of thing. So the short answer is we do plan on doing games for other consoles. As of today, we are weighing our options, deciding what other game consoles we might want to support, and we have no announcements at this time.
Thank you, Mr. David, for your answer. Una última pregunta que tenemos aquí, alguien que nos está pidiendo. Aquí tenemos a don Alejandro. Adelante.
Hola, ¿qué tal, David? Alejandro. Quería hacerle una pregunta. ¿Cuál es su juego con el que más se entretuvo durante todo este tiempo? ¿Cuál es el que más le gusta? Entiendo que tiene juegos como Los Cazafantasmas, que es muy famoso acá en Chile. Muchos de nosotros los jugamos en aquella época. Pitfall 1 y Pitfall 2 también son muy famosísimos aquí en Chile, lo mismo que el Keystone y el Decathlon, especialmente, con el que partíamos destruyendo los joysticks. ¿Cuál es su juego preferido, el proyecto más entretenido que tuvo dentro de todos estos videojuegos que eran para la plataforma Atari 2600 o la serie XL? Eso sería. Un gran saludo aquí del Call Recuerdo. Que esté bien.
Gracias, Alejandro.
Well, as I said at the beginning, people often ask me, what is my favorite game? And I do use the Grand Prix example because in the days of the 2600, the way I started making a game each time was I would try to figure out some new way to make the designer of the Atari 2600 proud. In other words, some new way to make his system do something it had never done before. And that's kind of like the first step. And then when I do that, I look at it and I say, all right, what kind of a game can I make using this new technique? That's how the Grand Prix game came about. And it was one of my proudest accomplishments. That said, I've made 100 games and played hundreds of games. And I don't ever sit down and say, boy, that was the best game I've ever played, or that's my favorite game. What I do when I'm playing other people's games is I appreciate the special things that they do to make something happen. It could be something that they do technically. It could be something that they did in gameplay. And anyway, so it's hard for me to answer. Now, ironically, I play games every day, but what I play is I have a friend that lives hundreds of miles away, and we play Words with Friends every day. So that's a Zynga game. So, you know, I play games for fun. I don't play games for, well, and I play games to see what people are doing that is cool. But I don't ever rate them to say this is my favorite game of all time.
Thank you, Mr. David. Muchas gracias. Bueno, ya estamos en el tiempo de finalizar la conferencia. Primero que todo, don David, primero quería mencionarle que es un honor, un agrado estar acá con usted, que usted nos acompañe en esta Expoatari 2025, que comparta lo que hizo, cómo lo hizo, y además contarnos historias en el camino fue bastante emocionante. La verdad es que espero que todos los que estemos acá hayamos disfrutado este momento y agradecerle a don David que haya estado acá con nosotros. Así que cuando nosotros cerramos las conferencias, siempre invitamos al público a que suba al escenario y se saque una foto con la persona que está en la pantalla grande atrás, para que todos nos veamos los asistentes y todos podamos decir que estuvimos compartiendo con usted un momento. Así que los vamos a invitar a todo el escenario y, por favor, aprovechemos de darle un gran aplauso a don David Crane, que estuvo hoy con nosotros. Maravilloso, espectacular. Yo me llevo esto para toda mi vida. Me lo llevo como recuerdo para toda mi vida, algo emocionante. Así que, por favor, sumémonos acá al centro para que podamos compartir con don David este momento y que podamos tenerlo para la posteridad. Por favor, póngase aquí al medio, algunos agáchense, acomódense por ahí. Adelante, adelante, con confianza. No sea tímido. Va a salir lindo en las fotos, vamos, va a salir bello, como nunca. Bueno. Porque ahí para que te mueves, para que te veas. Digan Audacity. Audacity. Pitfall. Ahora desordenado. Muchas gracias. Un aplauso para don David Craig. Muchas gracias por haber estado con nosotros. Un gran abrazo y nuevamente muchas gracias.
Well, I'm glad I could be here. Hope you enjoyed the talk. And next time, let's do it in person.
Sería maravilloso que estuviese con nosotros en persona acá en un Atari Expo compartiendo. Así le podemos compartir los deliciosos bocados, cosas y comidas que tenemos aquí en Chile. Así que sería maravilloso y un honor. Muchas gracias, don David. Esté muy bien. Hasta luego. Hasta pronto, don David. See you soon.
Okay.